Hello, I'm Valerie McLennan. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. I hope you're well. This is my spiritual channel and I incorporate ways of life, share funny stories, make you laugh, sometimes burst into song, even surprising myself. All of the above. Now, if you're a new listener, thank you very much and I hope you will remain, and more importantly, could you maybe revert and listen to the previous podcasts. Don't just listen to one and run away. Please listen and revert to the previous ones. If you've been following me a while, as I said, I've been doing this now for, I think it's 2 years this month. You're surprised? How do you think I feel? I thought it was a year. You've said this before, I know. I thought it was a year now because I remember I started in October. I think it's 2 years now. Anyway, if it's a year, thank you very much for sharing my year. If it's 2 years, thank you very much for sharing my 2 years. Now, the intention, as I said previously, for this podcast is to share experiences I've had in my own life, share stories, and to discuss my own personal beliefs regarding the spiritual laws. I'm not going down any particular religion. I'm spiritual, and it's all regarding keeping your mind relatively sane as you go through life, sharing the tools that I use, that I'm aware of, and obviously incorporating it into the spiritual laws, why we're here, and all of the above. Look at me as your little reminder. That's all I'm doing. I just ask you to stop, sit, and listen for maybe 15 minutes. My podcasts are only 15 minutes. I keep it to 15 minutes-ish because I heard a long time ago, people's concentration is a maximum of 20 minutes and then they tend to start thinking, what's for dinner? How very rude. Anyway, for that purpose, I try and keep my podcast to 15. Thank you. Now, what I was going to say this evening is regarding life. Now, you imagine trying to discuss life in general in 15 minutes. Oh no, try being me. But I'm going to try and kind of do this in a way just so that I hope it makes sense and you'll see where I'm coming from and what I'm trying to get through on this podcast prior to my tour next year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please listen to previous podcasts. I will be offering talks face-to-face, live, and all of the above. Someone said live. I said, well, the alternative doesn't sound very good. So I thought I'll make it live. Boom, boom. Anyway, Basil Brush, what age are you when you know Basil Brush? Anyway, if you think I'm going to try and do this in a shorter version than normal, and I was going to say headlines, if you don't know what I'm talking about, again, revert back to a previous podcast. Now, if you think of your life when you arrive on Earth, now you're no different to me, we are all the same, we're all human beings, and I'm generalising. Obviously, there might be one or two where circumstances are different. I'm just generalising. We come into life, into Earth, and, ideally we've got parents there that might look after us, care for us, etc. We've got those around that we maybe trust, who, the common expression, who have your back, all of that stuff. But, you come into the world and you've got the trust. You have an innate feeling of trust. When have you ever seen a baby and you've looked at the little face and gone, oh, look at that terrified, scared little face. Most of them, babies, are very full of love, full of everything. They don't know, they've not experienced anything in their life to turn them bitter and full of bitter and resentment, that kind of thing. So you look at the way babies generally arrive on Earth and they're just oozing love. All they're looking for is, to be enveloped in kindness and warmth, to help them, to nurture them, and to grow in their little child, as a child, as a baby, all the way through their little childhood. And then when they reach a certain age, off they go into the world. But what the role on Earth is that for parents is to try and nurture them as much as you can, instill everything in them that they'll need to get them through the rest of the world. Now, obviously in life, many of us face different situations. Some children, even very, very young, whatever it is, might lose their parents. So you imagine from a very young age, if they're losing parents, and then even maybe a little bit older, then you're losing parents, you're losing family, you're losing this. So your initial feeling when you're coming in the world is nurture, and everyone's out to pat you on the back and build you up. Generalising. Now, as we go through life, obviously different circumstances, life gets in the way. And then we start to realise this is not all love, compassion and empathy. If you lost your parents, if you lose family, if people no longer have your back, the people that you might be depending on when you're growing up suddenly walk away. Maybe they don't have your back. Maybe they're causing more problems than, to say love might be, the reverse of what's happening. So the people that you were or should be able to depend on when you're growing up are no longer there. The building blocks that you had as a baby and a little toddler and your parents and everybody looking after you, making you feel, everything. Now, what happens when you're growing up? Something happens to the parents, something happens to the siblings, then they're growing up a bit more mature, then you're in the workplace, then there's this, then you realise that people don't really just agree with everything you're saying. Then you might meet the bully type, then you might meet this type, now, from this little child, innocent eyes, looking into the world, look at everything that everyone is going to have to deal with growing up. Now, the loss of a parent at any age is a terrible, terrible impact on your life, especially if you're very, very young. And then if you imagine even people in their 20s, I know people who's maybe in their late 30s who have recently lost a mother, etc. Now, that can be emotionally crippling. Now, obviously, I've got 15 minutes with this, but what I'm trying to say, people, wherever you are in your life, and this is happening to you, especially years ago when the male version, when men didn't really like to talk about their feelings or show feelings, they tend to bottle it, and they don't show. I'm generalising. I'm talking about people that I've met and I've known in my life, throughout my life, tend not to talk about it. They kind of think, even in grief, if you notice in grief, if people lose, as they're growing up, if they lose their parents, you're supposed to get over it in a couple of weeks. People say, how long's that? Well, okay. So after maybe a couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever it is, people are supposed to, or they feel internally themselves that they've got to look normal again and get back to work, go to work, carry on. Now, I've had discussions over the years with people who said it's unreal, that they had either lost a mother, a father, whatever it was, and they had the funeral, and they felt they had to go straight back to work and act like normal. And they were looking around thinking, how is this world just acting normal and going back as it was? And I've just come through this horrendous kind of trauma. Now, I've said until I'm blue in the face over the months and over this last couple of years, we will all face this. This is something that each and every one of us will have to face. And if you look at the circle of life, there's people from the baby growing up to adults who are now taking over the role of looking after their parents. Now, I unfortunately know people in all, just because of the talks and the spiritual work, I know people in all of those situations. I know adults now, maybe in their 40s and their 50s, who are now looking after their elderly parents. And it's like the complete circle of life. Now, my point being, this, and I'm only talking about those kind of situations with loss, or even people then ending up having to physically and emotionally invest everything in elderly parents, etc. Now, you imagine the impact that would have in your life if, you know where I'm going, if you don't have any belief in anything. And you're thinking, I'm just on this earth. And I've had people saying this, I'm just on this earth to suffer. Now, the danger is if you're not a person that shows vulnerability or talks your feelings out, you're bottling it. And a lot of people tend to get isolated and more isolated because they tend to think, when I do meet people, they just hurt you anyway. So people tend to, the people I've met, people I've spoken to, they close the doors. And they think, if I don't speak to anyone, there's no chance of them hurting me. Now, that sounds extreme. You would be surprised how many people, even subconsciously, are doing that in their life. I don't want to know. No. And they're not really kind of showing that vulnerable side of themselves. Now, can you imagine the difference in this world if everybody just acted as themselves? Remove the mask. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. Now, some people, if you're on this spiritual path doing what I do, think, you're sorted. What would you know? Come here. Give me a break. As I keep saying, although myself and many others are on this path, we are facing each and everything the same, more or less the same challenges as you will, well, probably, in my lifetime. It's how we manage it. At the same time, spiritual path or not, I draw comfort. Now, I had this conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago. I also draw comfort from other people talking to me. It's not just a give. In this spiritual path, I'm giving out my energy and I'm talking to you and I'm giving you what I know and I feel and I believe in the hope of it helping you. That doesn't mean that I don't need anything back in return. I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago and again today, I think it was today, I had another conversation similar. People sometimes, if you're on this path or similar and you're doing this type of thing, they don't feel that they need to offer anything back emotionally, that you're just kind of giving. That's not the way it is in life. Life is a give and take, and we're all just doing our best to survive. There's times, now, even in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've had people say to me, I had said on this podcast, I'm not alone, life throws you a curveball. Now, people are going around using my lines. I know, noticed it. They've even got the audacity to say it back to me. I know. The curveball in life. I know I could probably about maybe 10, even more people in the last few weeks who have been delivered horrendous news about their parents or family, maybe health related, and it's kind of very, very serious health related, not trivial, not a cold, if you get my drift. Now, people have to suddenly deal with this truth that they're getting told about their parents. Other ones, it's about their family. There's different situations only in the last number of weeks. Now, some of those people don't have any belief in anything, nothing, or didn't have any belief in anything. And I keep saying, if I didn't have a belief or I hadn't even looked at the spiritual path or anything, and I had to just accept all the things that were happening to me and get through it with no belief, I would have found this absolutely emotionally crippling, because those times are challenging enough, painful enough, with a belief. And what I'm saying is, if I didn't have the belief I have, if I didn't have the trust in the universe that I do have, I would find this impossible. Now, I've had people over the last number of weeks telling me that, they were listening to some of the podcasts that I was doing and they were taking the jokey stuff, as they put it. They were taking the jokey stuff, but they didn't realise, this is actually quite a nice compliment, they didn't realise they were absorbing all the spiritual stuff. So what I was doing, I'll tell you, what time am I at? 12? I'll give you a little thing. Someone, and it was meant as a compliment. It was a man, and he was saying he's going through something just now that's come right out of the blue. And he was saying to me, I've been listening to you he said couple of years, so I'm assuming it's 2 years. Either that or he's just saying the same as me. He said, I've been listening to you the last couple of years, and he's enjoying the patter. The patter, no, my banter, no, my Scottish nonsense. Anyway, he's obviously been absorbing my spiritual stuff. Now, this is my plan. And he said, his words to me were, I like the way you deliver this, because you're giving the spiritual talk, and you're giving the serious stuff, and you're giving it with a little sting and a little push, but at the same time, and I turn it into something light. And I said, do you think I don't know I do that? Have you looked at the name of my channel? Valerie Mac, Scottish, spiritual, and very funny. But anyway, the compliment behind it was he's been absorbing the spiritual stuff along with the kind of patter and the jokes, and he found it comforting. Now, this is what I mean. He found it comforting without even knowing why. Because he's just come through, he's just had some really awful news about family, health related, where there's this kind of end of life type of stuff. Now, that to me is the biggest compliment I can take. And even if it's only one person in the 2 years, and I don't believe that for a second, but even if there was only that one person in all the 2 years I've been doing this, my work here is done, because that's all I want to do. When there's people in life going through the horrible times that we'll all face, that they get something and they hold on to this spiritual path. Now, he's now going on to this path. That's as much of a compliment as I can get, because although I'm telling you jokes and doing this thing, I'm giving you it from my heart and the belief that I have. As I keep saying, I won't know till I take my last gasp on earth if I was right or wrong. In the meantime, I can only give you what works for me. Now, someone else I spoke to this morning, I don't know if he listens to this, but I would like to say, someone I just tend to pass his house when I'm out walking my legs off just now. Now, they're a lovely couple, and I only really know them vaguely in a hello and a here. Now, he stopped today, and we had a few words. Now, if you are listening, those few words, I did say to him, thank you very much for your kind words. I was talking about the dog and different things, and he was used to seeing me passing his house with the dog, etc., etc. Now, he didn't need to spend that time. I don't know him apart from a hello normally. But I did say to him, thank you very much for your kind words. And I want you to know, if you were listening, I really appreciate that. And the whole point of this podcast is, if more people show their vulnerability and compassion and empathy in life, because I'll tell you something, you, the person behind you, the person along the road, at one time in your life, you are going to be looking for what everybody's looking for when they go through this. So you be the person to start giving kindness for a change. Sarcasm and resentment is so easy to dish out. My point being, we'll all face this in life. It's not a walk in the park. You can make it easier for every person. And that chap today didn't have to speak, didn't have to do anything, but I appreciate it if you are listening to this. Thanking you. I'll be back on tomorrow, and I hope you've listened again. Please take it on board. Take care. Bye for now.